I was 31 years old, sitting at my parents' dinner table on a Friday night, and my father handed my brother an envelope full of cash like it was the most natural thing in the world. $20,000, in cash, right there at the table. And then he looked over at me and said, "You should just rent somewhere, Cass. That is more realistic for you." The whole table went quiet. My mother looked down at her plate. My brother Stellan held the envelope and said nothing. And I just sat there thinking, okay, I see exactly how this is going to go. Before I get into what happened next, I want to know where you are watching this from right now. Drop your city or your state in the comments, and if you have ever been told that your dreams were not realistic, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what I did with that moment. Because what happened over the next 7 years is the kind of thing I am still not sure I would believe if someone else told it to me. Let me take you back to the beginning. I want to be clear about one thing first. I was not broke when that dinner happened. I was not struggling in some desperate way. I was a 31-year-old woman working as an assistant property manager at a small firm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had a steady paycheck, a one-bedroom apartment I rented on my own, and $7,000 sitting in a savings account that nobody in my family knew about. I had been quietly building that number for about 2 years, cutting back here and there, picking up extra shifts when I could. I was not living dramatically below my means. I was just careful. And I had a plan, a real one, not a daydream, not a vision board kind of plan, an actual written-out plan to buy my first piece of real estate within 3 to 5 years. I had not told my family about it yet because I already knew how they would react. That Friday dinner confirmed everything I had suspected. On the drive home from my parents' house that night, I did not cry. It was an hour and a half back to Albuquerque, and I drove the whole thing in silence with the radio off. I just thought. I went through the numbers in my head. I thought about the fact that 3 years before that dinner, I had called my father and asked to borrow $8,000 after a car accident left me with bills I could not cover fast enough. He told me he did not have liquid cash available at that moment. I had to take out a personal loan to get through it, and then I watched him hand Stellan $20,000 in a white envelope over pot roast. I was not angry about the money. I want to make that clear. I was angry about what the money meant. It meant my father had looked at both of his children and decided one of us was worth investing in and one of us was not. And he had never said that out loud, but he said it with that envelope. By the time I pulled into my parking spot that night, I had made a decision. I was not going to argue with him. I was not going to bring it up again. I was not going to wait for anyone in my family to believe in me before I started. I was going to do it without them. The next morning, I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, and I wrote out every number in my life. Income, fixed expenses, variable expenses, current savings, debts. I looked at the full picture with no softening, and then I figured out what was actually possible if I stopped doing anything that was not essential. I set a target, $22,000 in 3 years. Here is what I stopped doing. I stopped eating out entirely. Not mostly, not usually. Entirely. I packed my lunch every single day and I cooked every meal at home, including on weekends. I cancelled a trip to Florida I had been planning with friends for 8 months. I did not buy a new car even though my existing one had already crossed 170,000 miles and made a sound when I turned left that I chose not to investigate too closely. I stopped buying clothes except for 2 specific work items I genuinely needed. And on top of all of that, I started picking up weekend on-call shifts managing a residential building across town. The pay was not great, but it added up, and it kept me busy enough that I was not spending money out of boredom. Every month I moved a set amount into a separate savings account that I did not look at casually. It was not connected to my checking account in any app on my phone. I had to log in separately to see it. That was intentional, out of sight, building quietly. During those 3 years, I kept going to the monthly family dinners, every single one. My mother would ask how I was doing and I would say fine. My father would give me a quick update on Stellan's progress. Stellan had found a house, Stellan was in the inspection period, Stellan needed a little extra for some repairs and my parents had given him $6,000 more. My father talked about Stellan's house the way some people talk about a shared project they are proud of. His voice was different when he talked about it, warmer. Nobody asked about my living situation beyond whether I was still in the same apartment. When I confirmed that I was, the subject moved on. There was one person I told. One, Her name was Devon and she had been my closest friend since college. She worked as an accountant in Albuquerque and we met for coffee once a month without fail. About 8 months into my savings plan, I told her everything. The target, the timeline, the Friday dinner that started it, all of it. Devon did not express shock or tell me I was being too ambitious. She asked one question: did I need her help with anything? I told her the only thing I needed was for her not to mention it to anyone. She agreed without hesitation. From that point on, she was the one person who knew. Over the following months, Devon did more than stay quiet. She introduced me to a real estate agent she trusted named Petra, who had been working the Albuquerque market for over 12 years. Devon had used her for a small property transaction of her own a few years earlier, and described her as someone who did not waste your time or oversell you on things that were not right for your situation. I met Petra for coffee, explained what I was working toward, and she started sending me listings periodically, so I could understand the market while I was still building my cash position. By the end of the 3rd year, I had $22,000 in that account. I called Petra. She had already identified several properties worth looking at seriously. The one she led with was a duplex in the southeast part of Albuquerque, listed at $89,000. It had been built 50 years earlier and needed some cosmetic work, a few repairs to the plumbing on one side, and updated fixtures throughout. But both units were rentable immediately. The area was transitioning in a positive direction. Average rent for each unit was running around $750 per month. I went to see it alone on a Saturday morning. Petra walked me through every room. I checked the walls, the plumbing access points, the electrical panel, the condition of the roof from the outside. I stood in the backyard of the second unit for about 3 minutes just looking around and thinking. Then I called Petra and told her I wanted to make an offer. We went back and forth with the seller twice. We landed at $87,500. I qualified for a conventional mortgage with my down payment and my income, and the debt-to-income ratio worked based on projected rental income. The closing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Devon took a half day off work to be there. There was no one else. No family, no celebration planned, no announcement. Just me, Devon, Petra, and the seller's attorney at a conference table. When I signed the last page, Devon put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You just bought a house." I looked at the stack of papers in front of me and I felt something shift that I do not have a precise word for. It was not euphoria. It was more like certainty, like something that had been uncertain for a long time had just become fixed. I did not post anything. I did not call my parents. I drove home, made dinner, and went to bed at a normal hour. The next morning I went to work like it was any other Wednesday. Both units of the duplex were rented within 3 weeks of closing. Combined monthly rent was $1,500. After the mortgage payment, insurance, property taxes, and a set-aside for maintenance, I was netting around $300 per month from the property. That number was not life-changing on its own, but it was real, it was consistent, and it was mine. More importantly, I was learning. The duplex taught me what it actually felt like to be a landlord, fielding a maintenance call at 7 in the morning, coordinating a repair with a tenant's schedule, reviewing a lease renewal and deciding whether to adjust rent or hold steady. These were not things I had learned from a book. I was learning them by doing them, and every decision I made with my own money felt different from every decision I had made on behalf of someone else's property at my day job. 6 months after closing on the duplex, I bought my second property. It was a single-family house in a neighborhood with strong school ratings on the northeast side of Albuquerque. The purchase price was $115,000. I used a combination of new savings and a cash-out option that Petra had walked me through based on the equity I had already built in the duplex. The family that moved in had 2 children and signed a 2-year lease without negotiating a single term. They paid on time every month without exception. What the second property taught me was the relationship between location decisions and tenant stability. Families with children who are enrolled in a specific school district do not move casually. They stay because moving would disrupt their children's education. That stability had real financial value that I had not fully appreciated before I experienced it directly. 4 months after the second property closed, I bought a third. This one was smaller, a 2-bedroom house in a neighborhood that was still working through its transition. The price was $72,000, and the numbers worked on paper. The first tenant I placed moved in and then disappeared in the middle of month 2. No notice, no forwarding address, some minor damage to the interior walls and a broken fixture in the bathroom. I handled it without calling anyone for help. I contacted a contractor I had used at the duplex, got the repairs scheduled, repainted the walls myself over a weekend, and had a new tenant in place within 3 weeks. The experience was frustrating, but it was not a crisis because I had kept a separate maintenance reserve for each property. That reserve existed because Devon had asked me early on what my plan was if something went wrong, and I had not had a good answer at the time. She had pushed me to build one before I made any more moves, and I had listened. Devon came by the third property on a Saturday afternoon while I was finishing the last of the repainting. She stood in the doorway and said that I was doing the work of 3 people by myself. I told her that was accurate, and that this was still mine, and that made it different from every other property I had managed in my professional life. The fourth property came 14 months after the first. It was a 2-story house that needed more significant work than anything I had taken on before. The list price was $44,000, which was low for a reason. The structure was sound, but the interior needed updating throughout, and one of the bathrooms had water damage that required full remediation. Petra flagged it for me and told me that the area it sat in had been appreciating steadily, and that her projections, based on recent comparable sales, suggested the property would be worth considerably more within 3 years if I held it. This was the first time I used leverage in a deliberate strategic way. I took a home equity line of credit against the duplex to fund the acquisition and renovation budget. The math was specific, and I ran it 3 times before I committed. The renovation came in slightly under my estimate, which gave me a buffer. The house appraised significantly higher after the work was completed, and I had a tenant in place within a month of finishing. At the 18-month mark from my first closing, my portfolio consisted of 4 properties. The combined assessed value across all 4 was $320,000. The combined net monthly income after all expenses was just over $1,100. That number was growing as I paid down principal on the earlier mortgages and as rents in the Albuquerque market continued to move upward. Not one person in my family knew any of this. The dinners continued. Every month I drove out to my parents' house and sat at the same table. My father had moved on from talking about Stellan's house purchase to talking about Stellan's landscaping, Stellan's new vehicle, the addition Stellan was thinking about building. My father's voice carried the same warmth it always had when the subject was Stellan. One evening, maybe 14 months into my quiet portfolio building, my father made a comment that I have not forgotten. He and Stellan were talking about Stellan's property, and my father said without looking in my direction, "I am proud of you for knowing how to build a stable life." He said it directly to Stellan. I was sitting 3 feet away. I did not react. I picked up my fork and kept eating. On the drive home that night, I opened the property management app on my phone at a red light and checked the income dashboard for all 4 properties. Everything was current. I put the phone down and drove the rest of the way home. Marcus was a freelance journalist who wrote primarily about personal finance for a regional publication based in New Mexico. He had been working on a piece about women under 40 who were building real estate portfolios independently in mid-sized cities, and as part of his research, he had pulled publicly available property records from Bernalillo County. My name appeared 4 times in those records within an 18-month window. He reached out through the contact form on my employer's website with a brief explanation of the piece he was writing and a request for a short interview. I read his message twice, then I called Devon. Devon listened to the whole thing and then said, "Do you have anything to hide?" I told her no. She said, "Then talk to him." I met Marcus at a coffee shop in Midtown Albuquerque on a Thursday afternoon. He was organized and direct, and he asked good questions. I told him about the 3-year savings period, about the duplex, about each subsequent property and what I had learned from each one. I did not tell him about the family dinner. I did not tell him about my father's comment or the envelope or any of it. He did not ask about my family. The piece ran 2 weeks later. The headline read, "At 31, she built a real estate portfolio worth $320,000. Nobody in her family knew." The headline was his. I had not suggested it, but it was accurate. The last paragraph of the article noted that I had built the portfolio without financial assistance from anyone, using only my own savings and the equity I generated from the properties themselves. That sentence was not written to target anyone. Marcus had no context for why it carried the weight that it did, but it was the most precise sentence in the piece. My mother found the article first. A friend of hers shared it on social media and left a comment asking if the woman in the photo was her daughter. My mother recognized my name and my face immediately. She called my father. He read the article. Then he called Stellan. Stellan read it. None of them called me that day. I found out later that my mother had sat with my father in the kitchen for most of that evening without turning the television on, which apparently was unusual enough that Stellan mentioned it when he came by to drop something off. Nobody in the family had a conversation about it that night. They each just held the information separately. My mother called me that evening around 9. Her voice was not her usual voice. She asked if I was doing okay. I told her I was doing well and that everything was fine. She said okay. She did not ask about the article directly. We talked for about 4 minutes and then she said good night. Stellan sent me a text message. It was one word, wow. My father did not contact me that day or the next. On the third day after the article published, my father called. The tone of his voice was different from anything I had heard from him before. The certainty he normally carried was not there. He asked if it would be possible to have a family dinner that was not the regular monthly one, something separate. I asked him what the purpose of the dinner would be. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said that he wanted to see me. Not talk at me, not update me, not check in on me from a distance. He said he wanted to see me. I told him I would come. I asked Devon to come with me to the dinner. She was the only person who had been present for the whole story from the inside, and I did not want to walk into that house without someone who knew the full truth of what the last 7 years had actually looked like. My parents did not object when I told them I was bringing her. The drive out was quieter than usual. Devon did not try to prepare me or tell me what to expect. She just drove with me and we talked about other things for most of the way, which was exactly what I needed. When we got there, the table was set the same way it always was, but the feeling in the room was completely different. Nobody had the television on in the background. Nobody was moving around. My parents were both seated when Devon and I came in, and Stellan was already there. Everyone looked up when we walked through the door. We sat down. My mother had cooked everything I had grown up with, all the usual dishes, but nobody moved to serve themselves right away. There was a pause that sat over the table for longer than was comfortable. My father spoke first. He said he had read the article more than once. He said that he had looked at the dates in the public records that Marcus had referenced in the piece, and he had done the math on the timeline. He understood that I had started the process around the time of a specific family dinner, and he understood which dinner that was. He did not soften what he said next or build up to it. He said, I was wrong not to believe in you. He did not follow it with an explanation or a justification. He did not say, but I thought, or back then I did not know. He just said that he had been wrong and that the evidence of how wrong he had been was documented publicly in a county property database and in a regional newspaper, and that it had taken both of those things for him to sit down and say something he should have said years earlier. I did not say it was okay. I did not tell him not to worry about it. I had spent my whole life smoothing things over in that house, making the discomfort smaller so everyone else could stay comfortable. I was not going to do that this time. I looked at him and I said, I know. That was all 2 words, and I let them sit. My mother started crying before I had finished the sentence. Not quietly. She cried the way people cry when they have been holding something for a long time. She said she remembered the night I had mentioned wanting to invest in real estate, the specific dinner, the specific moment. She said she had seen my father's reaction, and she had said nothing. She told me that was the part she could not let go of, not just that she had not supported me, but that she had sat there and watched someone dismiss me and chosen silence. I did not move to comfort her immediately. I let her sit with it. Then I reached over and put my hand on hers and told her that I did not need her to feel guilty for the rest of her life. I told her what I needed was simpler than that. I needed her to actually see me. Not check in on me, not ask if I was fine, but see what I was doing and take it seriously. She nodded. She kept crying for another minute. Then she took a breath and she nodded again, more deliberately. Stellan spoke last. He had been quiet through all of it, which was not like him. When he finally said something, he did not make excuses. He said he had known for a long time that the way he was treated and the way I was treated were not the same, and that he had understood on some level that the difference was not based on anything real. He said he had stayed quiet because the arrangement benefited him, and that was a fact he had not been willing to look at directly until he read that article and saw what I had built without any of what he had been given. He was not crying, he was just direct about it in a way I had not expected. And because he was direct, because he did not dress it up or minimize it, I was able to look at him without the wall that had been between us for years. It did not dissolve completely, but something shifted. The next morning, I took all of them to see the properties. We started at the duplex, the first one, the $87,500 property that I had signed for on a Tuesday morning with Devon beside me and nobody else. I stood on the sidewalk in front of it and told my father the exact story of that day, what the closing looked like, what I was thinking when I signed the last page, what I did afterward. He listened without interrupting. At the second property, I walked him through the neighborhood decision. I explained why the school district data mattered and how I had found it and what the connection was between that data and tenant stability. He asked a question, a real one, not a polite one. He wanted to know how I had calculated the return on that specific property relative to what I was netting on the duplex. I gave him the actual numbers. He listened carefully. At the third property, I told him about the tenant who had left in the middle of month 2. I told him I had handled the repairs myself, that I had repainted the walls alone over a weekend, and that I had found a new tenant in under 3 weeks. He did not say anything. He just stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house. At the fourth property, I explained the equity line of credit and how I had used the duplex's appreciated value to fund the acquisition without touching my liquid savings. That was the moment my father asked the most questions. He had worked in construction management for most of his career, and the renovation side of the equation was the part that connected to something he understood. For the first time in the entire day, the conversation between us felt like two adults who were both interested in the same subject. Devon stayed with us through all of it. She did not add much. She walked a few steps behind and let the day be what it needed to be. At the end of the afternoon, we went to a small restaurant near my apartment for dinner. When the server came to the table, my father looked up and said in a perfectly ordinary voice that his daughter was a real estate investor. He said it the way you say something that is simply true. No performance in it, no pride that was trying too hard, just a fact he was stating. I looked down for a moment, then I looked up and said, "That is right, that is what I am." 6 weeks after that dinner, I closed on my fifth property. It was a single-family home near the center of Albuquerque, a few blocks from a major bus corridor, and within walking distance of a community college. The purchase price was $142,000. The location made it well-suited for long-term renters, graduate students, working adults who needed reliable transit access, people who signed leases and stayed. Petra had flagged it 3 months earlier, and I had been watching the listing carefully while I worked through the financing. When the timing was right, I moved. This time I posted about it. One photograph, my hand holding the keys, the front door of the property visible behind me. The caption read, "Number 5, built it myself." Devon's comment came first. "I always knew you would." My mother left a red heart below it. Over the next few hours, comments came in from people I did not know, people who had read the article or found the post through someone who shared it, asking how I had started and what the first step had looked like. My father called that evening. He said he and my mother wanted to take me out to dinner to mark the occasion. He said they would come to Albuquerque this time. I told him to pick a night and I would find the restaurant. The dinner was easy in a way that I had not expected. There was no wait sitting over the table. My father asked about the fifth property, about the community college proximity, about what my plan was for tenant placement. I answered all of it. My mother asked if I was happy, which was a different question from whether I was fine. I told her yes, that I was genuinely happy with where things stood. After dinner, I drove to the duplex alone. I parked across the street and sat on the hood of my car and looked at it. The lights were on in both units. Both tenants were home. I thought about the Friday night I had driven home from my parents' house after watching my father hand Stellan that envelope. I thought about the legal pad on my kitchen table the next morning. I thought about Devon sitting next to me at the closing table. I thought about painting walls alone on a weekend and not minding it. I did not feel anger sitting there. I did not feel the need for more acknowledgement than what had already happened. The accounting was done. My father had said what he should have said. My mother had seen me. Stellan had been honest. None of that changed what the past had been, but it changed what the present felt like. I picked up my phone and looked at the comments still coming in on the post. Someone had asked, "Where did you find the courage to start when nobody believed in you?" I typed back, "I stopped waiting for the belief to come from somewhere else, and I built the evidence myself." Then I put my phone in my pocket and looked at the duplex for another few minutes. Both units lit up, both tenants going about their evenings, not thinking about the person sitting across the street who had built this from a legal pad and a savings account and a dinner table moment that had changed the direction of everything. Then I opened the comment section one more time and typed a reply to the question I had been seeing most: "How do you start?" I wrote, "My name is Cassiopeia. I started with $22,000, a car with 170,000 miles on it, and a family who told me to rent somewhere. I own 5 properties now. You start wherever you are. That is the only place you can start from." I posted it, closed the app, sat there a little longer. This was mine, all of it. The duplex across the street, the houses on the other side of the city, the 5th one with the keys I had held in that photo this morning. The 7 years of Friday nights, the legal pad, the closing table, the painted walls. Mine. If any part of this story hit close to home for you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment and tell me. Has anyone in your life ever told you that something you wanted was not realistic for you? What did you do with that? I read every single comment and I want to know your story. If this is the kind of content that means something to you, please subscribe to this channel. There are more stories here, more real ones, and I do not want you to miss them. Share this one with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you made it all the way to the end, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it helps more people find these stories. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way through. To everyone who has ever been told to lower your expectations, keep going. The evidence you build speaks louder than anyone else's opinion of what you are capable of.